when I was growing up in this country, I grew up in the north, up in Michigan. We had some racism. We had race riots, but never as overt as they are now. When I was growing up, I went to an integrated school, which was in a mixed neighborhood, mostly Polish neighbors, and we got along well. Sure, as kids growing up, you're going to have neighborhood fights and disagreements, but never as overt as it is now. My early flash or early reaction from law enforcement is when I was in high school. I can remember I was able to work and have a car, and right out in front of my house, there was an accident. And my car was parked there, and the police, there was an open space between my car and the car that was parked in front of me. Well, the police, when they came, you know how you swing into a parking area and swing out. And that's what they did. They did their write-up. But as they were getting ready to swing out, he could not go all the way out. So he started backing up, and he backed into my car. And back then we had emergency brakes that we put on our cars because they were stick shift. And he just kept pushing. So I yelled at him, please don't keep pushing against my car. And he kept on doing it. So I yelled a second time. So he jumped out of the car, said, is this your car? I said, yes, it is. And I don't appreciate you bumping up against it like that. Oh, and he just said, oh, you one of them smart ones, huh? And he grabbed me, threw me in the car. Luckily, a neighbor of mine who was a detective was around the corner. And when that happened, my parents called him, and he called the station and said, tell them he better not have a scratch on him, and I'm coming down. Well, they had intended on taking me behind the station and maybe doing a little workup on me, but that didn't happen. That was my first real encounter. But I must tell you that over the years, I have seen, but have not really experienced a lot of it other than profiling, like we see happening now.
The only thing that I would add to that is obviously we grew up in different times, but unfortunately we had very similar experiences. I won't recount mine, but the opportunities that have existed can't be viewed in a vacuum without discussing the challenges. It was clear to me as we grew up and we moved from city to city that I was being viewed from the very first instance based on the color of my skin. When I would encounter people, fellow schoolmates, teachers, etc. And there were many instances where that was sort of the first interaction and first layer of communication that I had with them. Growing up In many instances, I was one of a few African Americans in the room, whether it was the classroom or whatever room I found myself in. We moved to Miami, and I attended Palmetto High School in the mid to late 70s. And even there, in the mid to late 70s, many of the classes that I had, I was among either one of two or the only one African American in my class. And that's obviously a visual moment to acknowledge sort of the differences, but it played itself out in many different ways. The opportunity that flowed from each of those instances was that I believe it made me a stronger person. My ability to adapt and excel and push through how others viewed and treated me, my ability to connect with people, a variety of different people, regardless of background, experience, and race, was enhanced by virtue of that experience, and able to do all of that without forgetting who I am, whose I am, and how I must approach human interaction. The last thing I'll say with respect to opportunities is the way in which I view each and every interaction is that it's an opportunity to learn, absorb knowledge from people, learn from their experiences, try to connect in a way that is respectful of both my experience, heritage, and background, and their experience, heritage, and background. To take the time to learn. I've always talked about the opportunity that I had to study in southern Spain, in Granada. It was an amazing opportunity. I got a chance to live with a Spanish family that spoke no English. I had not only a tremendous amount of fun, but the culture that I connected with gave me a greater appreciation. It broadened my experiences, obviously, and my ability to understand that there's so many different cultures, there's so many different ways in which people approach life. You don't have to ascribe a system of better or worse. We need to respect each person's point of origin and their view on various issues, and respect the differences that make us better as a people. And I will tell you, I recommend to anyone who will listen that if you really want to get to understand how amazing this planet is, take the time to connect with someone unlike you, with a different set of experiences than you have, and learn how to respect those differences while maintaining your own integrity.
I think just adding to what you have just said, Albert, we've had a unique experience that maybe many who may be listening to us have not had. We were able to move from city to city, live in different communities at a level of different, in many instances, than what happened in other quarters. And when I say that, moving from city to city, we had the opportunity to pick where we wanted to live, and to ensure that you as children grew up in a wholesome environment. Also, there was the interaction of your parents in every activity that you as a youngster and even as an adult was involved in. That in itself led itself to a different level of respect. And we taught each one of you that you treat people as you wanted to be treated. And you look down on no one because we're all the same. We may look different. We may talk different. But if you cut us open, we all look the same on the inside. And although we are brothers and sisters from different mothers and fathers, we're still God's creation and should be treated as you want to be treated. Now, I could say this, moving to Miami was different. Coming into the Hialeah area, I was the one of one black senior executives in Hialeah. And that was an experience. Some did not know how to take that, but I could tell you, if people start interacting, get to know each other, things would get better. As you have stated, we need to interact with people that don't look like us, don't talk like us, and come from various backgrounds.
Daddy, I just want to, and then we're going to let our interviewer actually ask us some more questions. But something you just said reminded me that as a child growing up, we would travel in the car from city to city, and during the summers, it was different places each summer. And as children, we didn't fully appreciate, and I will tell you, as the oldest of five, I know I didn't appreciate and didn't really learn until the last few years, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, talking to you, what our experience was really all about. Because we would drive from place to place in the United States, having to stop at a hotel or motel. We had the AAA triptych, no Google Maps at the time. And you and Mommy would not stop any place unless it was branded as a AAA hotel. And sometimes we drive and it would say vacancy on the outside. You'd have us all wait in the car, and then you would go in, and we didn't stay there. And we just assumed as children that either the sign was wrong, or there's something you saw that you thought we should go someplace else, not knowing that we were being rejected primarily, if not exclusively, because of our race. And you took great pains to insulate us from some of the horrors of racism, and while teaching us at the same time how to live in a community and in a country that many still saw us as second-class citizens. The last thing I'll say is, yes, when we moved to Miami, you were in Hialeah. But what was fascinating to me is the number of lifelong friends you created from all walks of life in Hialeah as a result of your willingness to engage and their willingness to engage with you purely on a human level.
Oh, those are really great stories. Thank you for sharing. And I think it goes a little into my next question. I want to know from both of you, how have things changed in Miami for Black people, and how have they stayed the same over the years?
There's an old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Uh, there's been a change in certain quarters, and then they fall back. I can remember back during the time when social programs were being cut out, and the county was worried about what's going to happen with all these young children out of school with nothing to do. Well, it took a public-private partnership to solve that problem. And that public-private partnership was the formation of Partners for Youth, which was co-chaired by Leslie Pantene Jr., Howard Snellenberger, and myself, where we raised funds to fund summer youth programs. Well, we went to the business community and government and raised funds to have parks open. If you go on in Northwest, you'll see a Partners for Youth park. That is a result of a public-private partnership. And I think it takes those kinds of things. Government can't solve it by itself. The community can't solve it by itself. It takes a cooperative effort on all parts. And it takes all segments of the community to be involved in the decision-making process.
I will add that neither one of us were born in Miami. We both came to Miami at the same time, all as a family in 1976. So our perspective on what has changed and how has it changed is based on that starting point. I can say that when I came to Miami, the lens through which I viewed our city was a high school junior and then a high school senior. When I left Miami, quite frankly, I swore I'd never come back. In part because, one, I hadn't given Miami a chance. I'd only lived here for a little over 2 years or under 2 years before I left to go to college. And it wasn't until I came back to do an internship while in college here in Miami that I began to fully appreciate what Miami was. And I say this to whomever will listen, that Miami was, and quite frankly still is, a small town. It's a small town that's spread across a lot of acreage, but for the most part, you can reach out and connect with almost anyone one chooses to, because we are a transient community that has a heartbeat that almost anyone in our community who wants to help improve the health of Miami can do so. And we've watched it over the years as people have come and go. Now, how has that affected African Americans from 76 forward? I couldn't agree more that the more things change, the more they say the same. But embedded in that statement is a recognition that things are changing. And the changing that is occurring is that the Black community continues to become more and more diverse. in South Florida. Opportunities continue to expand within South Florida. And the number of African Americans or persons of African descent who grow up here and return to South Florida continue to grow. That might sound like a success story, except for the following. The access and the ability to excel and the equity in that access has not improved materially. Yes, we can point to people who've held positions as recognition of change, but you can drive into too many other communities and in our great county and city, and there's too many people left out of those opportunities. Too many who've never had the privilege of traveling beyond South Dade or Overtown and Liberty City, or parts of Miami Gardens, which used to be referred to as Carroll City. Too many communities where people have not even had a chance to see the ocean that is magnificent as it brushes up against our wonderful beaches. And when you look at that lack of access and experience and opportunity, it just raises a challenge for South Florida. And that is, we can tout our diversity. We can tout the rich cultures that are represented here, but we should get closer to touting how these rich cultures and diverse backgrounds have equal and equitable access to great education, equal and equitable access to the upward mobility that comes with starting one's business and flourishing, and participating in our corporate environment. Those are the kinds of metrics that we should be focused on in determining what progress has been made, as opposed to looking at the exceptions to the rule, or looking at even those who have progressed in spite of, as a means of sitting back, relaxing, and believing that change has come, and therefore let's no longer focus on the need to make sure that everyone has equal and equitable access to all that our great community has to offer.
Thank you. So I want to talk now about McDuffie. I wonder, what are some of the lessons learned and some of the lessons lost since McDuffie? We're in a moment of BLM today.
Let me take that one first, if you don't mind. I need to get permission from my father. Can I take this one first? Okay. First, I for one said this publicly and privately, that I absolutely refuse to refer to that period of time in the history of our community as the McDuffie riots. And too often, people from the outside and the inside refer to the reaction and not the action that led to that reaction. We remember and talk about the impact of the riots versus the injustice that occurred and the feeling of helplessness that a group of people had in response to that injustice. And the lesson that we should learn is that even today, you see the focus on rioting and the response. However, and I would say this is a moment of reflection and opportunity, given what's happened with the global pandemic and the focus on social justice, that people have a moment to actually focus on the action And we are focused on the action and the action that needs to be addressed to avoid the reaction. See, what's interesting is that rioting in our country has always been a reaction to something. And it started with the reaction in Boston. We fondly refer to it as the Tea Party that occurred in Boston. That was a revolution or a riot against tyranny and the failure to have equal representation. By no means do you hear people referring to the Boston riots that patriots undertook in order to form our country. And there's so many other examples where we as a country or we as a people have either directly responded to injustices through what we now call riots, or we've helped others in other countries who have needed to respond to injustice in what we now continually refer to as riots. So, one man's riot is another man's freedom fight. And we have to be very careful the language that we use in referring to the response to the action that has occurred. So when you connect the dots in the timeline between McDuffie and Floyd, you ask yourself, back to your earlier question, what really has changed? Well, hopefully what will change in today's environment is that there will actually be justice as a result of what we all saw and what so many felt by the video that was played over and over again. It is important that the police officers who are critical to our society and to our community, who every day respond to dangerous situations, who risk their lives to keep us safe, continue to be upheld for that heroic mission that is a part of their job, and be held accountable for any time in which one or more of them break our trust and our desire to see police officers continue to remain safe. Because absent the action, the injustice that caused people to believe that there are systems in place that are not only unfair, but targeted in its unfairness to people of African descent. And if we use this as a moment not to hide from systems of accountability, not to come up with excuses why we can't hold those who have a badge accountable for actions that they take, no different than we should hold those without a badge accountable for the actions that we take, while still honoring their heroic mission and purpose and job. So those two can coexist, and it's important that we learn in this moment that they must coexist, or we will be destined to spiral out of control again, because no one learned the lesson of the McDuffie tragedy and the George Floyd tragedy.
Well said, Albert. And I think there should be more dwelling on accountability. When you look at all of the injustices that have happened, going back to Emmett Till, all the way up to George Floyd, there is a lack of accountability. There's a lack of enforcement on those that do those acts. It's always Well, it was in the performance of my duty. Well, I don't think it's their duty to be judge and executor of African Americans out on the street. That's not their jobs. But when they go that far, they should be held accountable. But all too often, they're hiding behind the badge, and a lot of the politicians will not step out and say it's wrong for fear of losing endorsements. And we got to get beyond that. We can set up systems for everything, but there's not a uniform system to govern misbehaving law enforcement officers. And I might add, there's only a few. By and large, we have one of the finest law enforcement systems anywhere in the world. But still, you have some bad apples, and they need to be weeded out. Because as long as we allow it to happen, we're going to be talking about this when your grandkids and their grandkids are faced with the issues that we're faced with.
One more thing, and I promise I won't do this again. I just want to add that the media can play a very important role in this, just as it has in the history of our country in many situations. We have all been exposed to the responses that come when there is some sort of action, police action, against someone, and next thing you know, someone is spending time looking into the history of this person and things that they may have done in their lives. First of all, I don't believe that any of us is perfect. But second, none of those issues, 9 out of 10 times, were evident at the time that the tragedy occurred, when someone's life was taken. We can have all kinds of conversations about someone's character who is now dead. We can have all kinds of media stories about the history and the background of this person and how imperfect they were. But they weren't wearing a sign at the time they were killed with neon lights flashing, "Please kill me because I have bad character." That is not what happened. And when you, as the media, allow this false equivalency of look at this bad person or this person that might have something in their history that makes them an imperfect person, therefore it justifies the killing of them, the taking of their life, by no means should you even allow that level of conversation to be repeated and amplified through the various media channels. So my point in sharing that is that we all have a role, regardless of our jobs and our professions, to consume information in a way that avoids the false equivalency or the belittling of life, and making sure you challenge those who bring up the history of a human being, the imperfect history of a human being that wasn't tagged on their back, that wasn't flashing in their eyes, that wasn't present in that moment when they were killed.
Mr. Dotson Jr., I just want to say I read the column that you wrote in the Herald about that and about how we should stop calling it the McDuffie riots. And I thought it was really powerful written, so I wanted to hear you talk about it as well. Mr. Dotson Sr., can you go a little more into, can you share some stories about being one of the first Black executives in Hialeah and what that was like? Some specific stories of that time.
Well, during that time, when I came into Hialeah in 1976, one of the first things I was told is that, in order to be in Hialeah working after dark, you got to get a work permit. I said, a what? And they may have been joking, but that's what I was told. And I said, well, I'm not going to get one, and they better not stop me. Well, that never happened in Hialeah, but in going, meeting with the business people, at first, they were a little standoffish. They tried to work around me by going to my assistant. Well, he couldn't make the call. He had to come in and see me. In fact, I've had them come into Hialeah store, wanting to see the store manager, and my secretary would bring them in to see me, and they said, no, I want to see the white manager. Well, that white manager worked for this black manager and could not do anything that I didn't say okay to. But as far as the community goes, I got involved. Back during the time Dale Bennett was the mayor, I had meetings with Dale and the police chief and the council people, Ruby Sweezy and a few of the others, and got ingrained in the chamber, the Spotlight Club that we had. We happen to have had a very diverse group of people in the Northwest State area because it incorporated Miami Lakes, Hialeah Gardens, Palm Springs North, Miami Springs, and the likes. So you had the John Hills, you had the Raul Martinez, and a bunch of others who were in that area who really opened up. And of course, back then, Senator Graham was in the state legislature and was going for the governorship. But we found, and over the years, that if you reach out and get involved, and people find out that you are sincere, they will include you. Now, that doesn't happen in all quarters, because when I came here, I saw what was happening with the school system. I got involved with the late Johnny Jones and saw the kinds of things that he implemented in the school system, many of them that are working now. We got involved with the chamber. We got involved with United Way. Well, in doing so, we were able to interact with many of the powers in Greater Miami. And Hialeah, as it evolved, as the Anglos moved out, the Cubans moved in, and you had a new power structure, and we were able to interact well with them, still do. But I extended myself, they extended themselves, and we became partners in the progress of what was going on in Northwest Dade. And it spread out throughout Miami-Dade County. Yes, I use the statement, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I've seen them change. I've seen them drop back, with the school system, how African Americans held some very meaningful roles. That has diminished somewhat. How in the employment market, how there was movement, that seemed to have eased off for whatever reason. But until we have equity, nothing is gonna get better. Until I'm looked at through the same lens as someone else is looked at, there are going to be issues. And it's going to take a concerted effort on the part of, yes, the media, yes, government, yes, the community, to make it happen. And I think that over time, it will happen. But we cannot continue to have the Floyd situations every few months happening. Because I'm at the point now where I can't breathe. Because it has gotten to the point that every time one of my children or grandchildren are out, I worry about them. Are they going to be safe? And the answer is, I don't know. And that's not fair. Albert?
Nothing more I can add to that. The question was about your experience in Hialeah, and I only had the pleasure of witnessing that up front for 2 years before I went off to college. And then I couldn't agree more with your final comments as well. So when something is well said, I just say, me too, and we can move to the next question.
And this, I think I'll make this my last question, but this one's for you, Mr. Dotson Jr. What's your father's legacy?
My father's legacy is significantly broader than the person speaking at this moment. First, yes, I share his name, as does my son, and we proudly share that name. Your first one of your first questions was about the change that has occurred here in Miami, and I prefaced my answer by noting that I had only been here, and we had only moved here in 1976. There's so many others who were born here in Miami or spent a large part of their life here that made such a difference and created such a legacy, like Dewey Knight and Athley Range and Carrie Meek. So many people whose legacy continues to grow even to this day. I think legacy in general is one that goes beyond the name and the lineage, but it focuses on what someone has done to make this community, this city, this state, and this country a better place for everyone. And having the pleasure of moving from city to city, from Detroit, where I was born, to Chicago, to Atlanta, and then ultimately to Miami, all with our family, I had the pleasure of seeing the impact that my father intentionally chose to have on the communities in which we lived. So that's why, to me, the intentionality of of his focus on community empowerment, without at all sacrificing his commitment to family, is the legacy I'm most proud of. Because wherever I travel, quite frankly, in a lot of cities, oh, you're Al Dotson? You look much younger. Yeah, you're talking about my father. Or you're Al Dotson? Oh, he was a mentor to me. I worked for him. I mean, there's so many of my colleagues today who said they worked for my father in Hialeah, Miguel DeGrande, Vicky Leyva. There's so many of my fellow lawyers who have mentioned to me that, you know, your father was the person I worked for right out of high school or while in high school. And they look at it fondly. And when you hear those comments and you listen to the impact that he has had on their lives, as stated by them, comments that he did not have to share, and they share willingly, you know that the legacy, yes, is embedded in our family, but more importantly, is embedded in the community. No different than, and in the same way that those who were born and raised here in Miami has been their home.
Yeah, I think that's good for me. I want to thank you guys again. This was super interesting, and thanks for taking the time to do it. I mean, if there's anything you want to add on the topic, please go ahead.
I just want to make sure I get a copy of anything positive that he said about me. Send me that clip so that I can keep it forever and remind him of that.
I'd like to say this. It's gratifying as a father to see your children get involved in the community in which you live in. We live by the saying that to whom much is given, much is required. Miami is a great city. It's a great place to live, work, and play. But each one of us, as we think about what Miami is, have an obligation to reach back and help someone to make it better. Because until we join hands as brothers and sisters to make things better, to paraphrase what Martin said, unless we come together as brothers and sisters, we're going to die apart as fools. And we look like fools every time we dish our town. I love Miami. I love living in Miami. I love people in Miami. And I think if we all would come together and realize, although we're all different, we're all the same. And we all have the same goal, to make this the best place to live, work, and play, and to hold each other accountable for our actions.